Hello and welcome to the G3 Pulse podcast. Joining me today is Jamison Selby, president of Rubystone, a California-based provider of free-to-play social gameplay sites, which are essentially powered by promotional sweepstakes for the US and Canadian market. Jamison, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So before we get into the intricacies of the social sweepstakes industry, which I'm familiar with, but I'm not kind of an expert in, particularly on the North American side. And I'd also like to discuss Ski On, your B2B platform as well. I'm interested to hear a bit more about yourself because this is the first opportunity we've had to chat. So if you could just tell me a bit more about your background. I've read something about you. Were you doing something in the Venetian that was quite interesting once upon a time?
It's going way back in time. I came into gaming through film and television, and a gazillion years ago, there was a push to take the game show Deal or No Deal into Las Vegas, and I ended up with a crew taking that idea into Vegas, pitching it to people, and trying to modify the show into a Charney Floor show for the Vegas market. Ended up on cruise ships, where I believe it's still running to this day, as a real money gaming stage show based on Deal or No Deal. But the game company that I went into Vegas with had a really interesting and interactive platform that allowed us to do really interesting shared gaming experiences in social spaces. So, turning a movie theater into an interactive bingo hall or a real money gaming hall with all kinds of games where hundreds of people were playing together against the big screen. So we adapted that and a bunch of things, and we ended up at the Venetian with a show called The Real Deal, where we built at the time, I think the largest wireless network that had existed in Vegas at that time, with hundreds of handheld slates. This is pre-iPhone. We had hundreds of slates that had about a 60-minute battery life, and we created a system where the entire audience could play against the poker pros on the table. So it was called The Real Deal at the Venetian. It ran for 9 months, something like that. But it was a wild experience. So we just spent a long time in the Venetian doing that show with all the poker pros. It was, crash course in working in Vegas.
And as we were saying just before we started the podcast, you're going to be at the Venetian once again for G2E Vegas coming up.
Indeed,
it's kind of the absolute law for you.
Yeah, walking down that hallway past the little theater, and so it always brings back some memories. But after that led to other things. We got more and more in gaming. We did a lot in bingo, installed bingo systems onto cruise ships and other interactive games on cruise ships where the whole audience was paying to play. All kinds of new and interactive game shows. We did real money live game shows with hosts and, all kinds of crazy activities on cruise ships. Did installations in the UK and in Ireland. And had a good time. And one thing led to another after that. I was sort of acting at the intersection of video games and gaming. And it was a very vibrant place. There was a lot of stuff going on. And then I was working on setting up esports for a company out of Dubai, and ran into old friends of mine who introduced me to a company called Gameplay Network. That was in the early days, long before we named it B-Spot, who were doing really interesting, and still are today, innovative things with live horse racing and games powered by live horse racing. So I spent a decade at GPN building up and launching B-Spot, which is now called Horseplay. And so I was doing that up until top of this year, and that led me to where I am now.
You've touched a couple of times there, once on video games and another on esports. Is that a passion of yours?
I grew up as a gamer, and that was the original opportunity when I had the chance to. I literally once had the chance to either go back and do a second season as senior producer of a game show that I was working on, or to, in the point of view of my friends at that time, run off with the circus and join the crazy video game people. And I did. I was like, this is a totally different opportunity. I got to play with all the toys. We were building interactive experiences and, just doing crazy things with tech and games and game designs, and things that no one had ever built or no one had ever tried, probably for good reason. But yeah, it was a chance to sort of dive back into what I really loved and was passionate about.
So from my understanding, I see on your LinkedIn that you're the president of Rubystone and the president of Ruby Network. So I was trying to get my head around it. So, Rubystone has its roots in Christchurch in New Zealand. Um, could you just flesh out the company
Sure.
background
The company
and
background.
Rubystone's relationship? Yeah, and the relationship with the network, with RubyPlay Network, and also with
100%.
Gaming Rewards Group, who are the kind of overarching parent company.
Yeah. So Gaming Rewards Group is sort of the behemoth beast with a whole slate of companies doing some different things. Everything from independent game studios to they had a crypto studio to they've done a lot of innovating things in real money and under different company names over the course of time. They were once called Loot Winner in the UK. They had a company called Cashed. Many different forays into the real money space under the overarching GRG banner. Ruby Play Network was sort of their core real money gaming team in New Zealand, building out all kinds of interesting systems. And they built the initial sites under the Ruby banner, Ruby Sweeps, Gold Slips, their first forays into the US market when they came in and built out a really innovative structure of working directly with bingo operators, small bingo halls, and creating sites for them and bringing their players online. And they did a lot of stuff, and they still are doing stuff when sort of player loyalty tokens and rewarded gaming and all kinds of interesting stuff. And that's where we were last year. But as we started discussing last year, the reality was to take advantage of the opportunity in the U.S. market was going to take a company on the ground, and they knew that. So they had started to incorporate entities in the U.S. and start to centralize assets over here so that we could just tackle this market. And that's where Rubystone ultimately grew out of that as sort of a U.S. cousin to our family in New Zealand. But for us here, what it gave us the opportunity was to create an entire structure in the U.S., and that may look small, but over our shoulder, we have over 100 people and dev teams with, 2 decades of experience in games and gaming who've done all kinds of things. They built stuff for big companies. They also, in years past, had built a work-for-hire shop called Cerebral Fix, who worked with every big company in California. And they earned their chops. They know they know how to build, and that gives us an enormous amount of strength. But that's where Rubystone came from. Rubystone grew to be the U.S. arm of GRG and cousin company to Ruby Play Network.
And PeakPlay is going to be Rubystone's flagship brand that's gearing up to launch in over 40 states and Canada. I mean, you touched on it there about the industry in North America. What gap have you identified? Because it's incredibly competitive. So there must be, as well as having that experience back across the Pacific, you must feel like there's a gap there for you to penetrate.
100%. I mean, one, just the sheer size of the market opportunity. And well, it's been evolving for quite a while. But, the wave started to crest last year as everyone started to look and realize, my gosh, the market opportunity here is massive. And the legality and the legal territory has been now hardcore proven and tested in court. And suddenly you had just major companies, AAA payment providers, the largest game studios in the world, everyone suddenly turning their gaze into the U.S. market, looking at social gaming and promotional sweepstakes and figuring out how does this work and can we operate in it? And we looked at that and said, everyone's coming. Companies that never would have even known about this or looked at it are now turning their gaze this way. We think we have the strength and the capability to be on the early wave of the fast followers, and we can bring a lot of tools into the market that don't currently exist. And just taking advantage of that opportunity was sort of a no-brainer. We have to go. This is just way too big an opportunity.
Sorry to override you, a bit of lag there. You mentioned court there. What regulatory issues and hurdles have there been recently?
Over the course of time, there have been some court cases in various states. There's a major one in Washington, which involves some social games operators, and really sort of clarified their operations. They were questioned about many things, and settlements sort of came down and really gave some defining characteristics of like, okay, look, on this question, here's how you have to do it. On this question, here's how you have to do it. So suddenly some clear rules started to come down as to not necessarily what is ironclad law in every state, but what is absolutely best practice and tested and proven. And some of the questions that people had asked, when they looked at the early sites that launched from VGW and others, and things started to codify into, no, this is going to be the way that this operates. And in Canada, where there were some questions about whether you could operate in which territories in Canada, and then last year the laws changed there, and now they can operate across the entire country. Those things kind of locked things in place, and I think it helped people realize this is open territory. You have to work hard at it. The compliance is very real. The idea that it's an unregulated market and therefore there are no rules is an utter fallacy. There are an extreme number of rules, and to work with the major companies in the space, there's an immense compliance hurdle that any new entrant is going to have to meet if they want to work with the biggest players in the industry. And these companies don't mess around. You're going to do it right, or you're not going to play.
What kind of regulations are they? Are those regulations kind of like they are in the kind of it is regulated, but the regulated iGaming industry, for instance,
I wouldn't say regulations. It's not necessarily like what you would consider the traditional regulations that the licensed iGaming out of New Jersey, or the specific rules and regulations set up by a regulatory board. On the other hand, there are very specific laws in every state. There are laws that apply to the operation of sweepstakes. There's also laws that apply to payments and taking money and player PII and PCI, and how you can legally operate when you take money from a player, what the rules are, how you have to give it back, how are sweepstakes operated differently in New York, Florida, Rhode Island, California. It's a lot, right?
Yeah.
And you really have to know exactly what's going on. Then you have to monitor on an ongoing basis what's happening in any state. Are there any new issues, any new laws? Is anything changing? The ground is not stable and firmamented and controlled by a specific regulatory body, but there are 50 states that set specific laws, and some of them are going to directly impact your operations, and you have to be ahead of it. And you also have to follow all of the laws to do with PII and bank secrecy, anti-money laundering, KYC, geolocation, all that stuff still applies. And I think to sometimes actually gets a higher level of scrutiny, since there's not just the simple, oh, we got the license, and therefore everyone just nods, oh, well, they got the license, we don't have to look any farther, that's already been proven. No, they're going to look at everything. And I think it's good, though. It starts to set up the rules of play. If you want to enter the space, you have to be able to run a professional organization. Over the time, there's over 50 sites live. There's over 100 companies on the march coming into this space easily. But some of them are going to have a hard time over the course of time. They're small, and pirate operations are going to have a rough time competing over the long haul because they won't be able to access the same partners that the companies in the space who are running on the tight and narrow are going to be able to work with.
And do you anticipate any more we'll call it regulatory issues or hurdles that are coming up? So you feel like a bit like maybe Daily Fantasy, it's been through the mill, if you will, and now it's there. It's just an opportunity that's there to be had, and everybody's going for it. Or do you anticipate kind of further issues in court, things being ironed out as more people enter the industry?
On a state-by-state basis, there will be interesting things popping up in different places. But I think ultimately, looking back from a point of view of years in the future, I think fantasy and skill give a really solid picture of what's likely to occur. Some states may take a completely counter position and ban all types of it, but the implications of that go very broad, and they end up having to ban many other types of activity that they might not have wanted to, and that gets really complicated for states. Other states might decide to regulate license and tax, and other states may decide, we're not even going to bother. But I think, when you look at fantasy and skill, I'm seeing the same arguments, the same discussion about fantasy being repeated right now. So I suspect that's a pretty good model. But that said, it's a volatile territory. We're going to have to see what happens. month by month as we go, especially over the next years. I mean, by next year there'll be over 100 companies active. I suspect a year after that we'll probably be back down to less than 30 because it's going to get much more competitive. A year ago, people were saying all you had to do to make money in this space was turn on.
Yep.
Right. That's changing because very talented people are coming into the space and launching companies, and they're going to compete very hard.
And what's Rubystone going to bring to the table?
I think we're going to bring to the table one, besides the simple development and creative strength of our own team that has decades of experience in building and designing unique gameplay for players, we're going to bring in the top partners in the world. Games and content, much of which has never been in the US market. Gamification, player engagement, loyalty, all the systems that some of which are very, very popular and used in Europe, but just not heavily in use here. Sometimes it's because the hurdle of getting a New Jersey supplier license is too much, or just not financially feasible for companies that have other pathways to make money. But we can offer some of those really unique tools a path into market. We can also bring in the little best of the best of everything from games, tournaments, and not just the standard slots and table card, crash. We're going to experiment with games from all over the spectrum. More casual style games, match 3, hidden object, pub games, faux skill. There's an enormous roster of creative opportunities, even live interactive game shows. We can touch all of those, and we will. And many of the top game providers are now working on new designs and playing things to try and experiment and see what can be done in this space. That gives us a list of ingredients that just hasn't been used in this market. And for some of those coming in, many people will have access to the same. Our goal is to be among the first to be able to access some of the content and then start to program it in really unique, interesting ways, and also tie it in to some of the systems that exist, tie it into our partners in the bingo industry across the US and Canada, and create aspects of the online game experience back and tying it into physical loyalty experiences with partners. We just have a recipe that hasn't really been able to be played with in the US market yet.
And if you're going to roll out great content, different content, that's enough reason for players to come. But how do you make players aware of who you are? What's the marketing strategy going to be across 40 states plus Canada, the small matter of Canada?
Small matter of Canada. One, you come out with going after the best marketing tools that we have. A lot of the early days, the combination of using all the social channels, which are incredibly powerful and we have access to, again, because we can meet the compliance hurdles to use those platforms. So standard stuff in user acquisition across those channels. We'll also be doing a full-on affiliate push, as a lot of the affiliates are now getting a significant chunk of revenue from the promotional gaming industry. They're all sort of very keen to expand their operations there. And we're also looking and discussing with some other groups some brand partnerships, which we'll announce later in the year. But I think there's some things like that, and that ties into our capability to run a multi-tenant platform. The fact that we can not just operate our own B2C site, which shows off everything we can bring to the table, shows off the games, the game companies, the payments, the loyalty tools, everything about the player experience. We can show off all of our capabilities in that. But we can run multiple sites. We have the live operations team to flip on new sites as we go. And we can do some of those with branded partners. And some of those partners have access to eyeballs in a pretty powerful way. So that's another way we'll look to get farther into market by leveraging the brand identity strength of some partners who want access to their own players in their own markets in a way that they haven't been able to reach them before.
So Ski On being Rubystone's B2B platform, that's going to be the big one to scale the company and capture the attention of these global brands.
Sign rewarded gaming platform, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we call it, the sign rewarded gaming platform. That's what we just named it. The technology platform that the team built out, just ridiculously robust and powerful platform, completely dedicated to a promotional gaming stack, and set up to run a fully multi-tenant operation, right? And so, yeah, we won't. Our only brand, but as we get into Q2 of next year, will not be PeakPlay. PeakPlay will still have a special place in our heart. It's where we do everything, try everything. But there'll be other brands popping up under our banner. I think that'll be sort of our ability to do that, to not just have a platform that somebody who's an operator and can do everything under the sun wants to utilize, but the fact that we have full white glove live service operations, the fact that we can take a brand and spin it live for them, gives us kind of a unique capability to do some interesting things at speed.
And kind of say we had another chat in a year's time before G2E 2025, where would you like Rubystone to be as a business? Where do you expect it to be, and where would you like it to be?
Well, I'd expect at that point that we've turned PeakPlay into a thriving and growing powerhouse in the industry, showing off the best of new game content and new tools and new player experiences. And at that time, we intended for Scion to be the sort of premier promotional gaming platform in the industry, with major third-party branded partners live under that banner. And with them coming in, really taking a large chunk out of that market and having a large chunk of the promotional gaming market running across our platform. That's what we're aiming for.
Jamison, thank you very much for coming on. Really enjoyed our chat. And you said just before we started that you're at EGR in California. So enjoy. I hope the show's a good one for you.
Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you want to watch more, why not subscribe to our channel somewhere here.